A community has come together to help the owners of a corner shop whose entire stock of chocolate melted. Ellis Stores in Scunthorpe lost about £1,000 worth of chocolates after its air conditioning failed to cope during the recent heatwave. An online appeal by Claire York, the daughter of the shop's owners Stephen and Linda Ellis, has raised more than £450 to replace the lost sweets. Miss York said her parents were so grateful for the donations. "My mum has just cried," she said. "For the whole week, she just cried every time anybody's given any money, anybody's done anything." The couple have run the independent shop on Cottage Beck Road for more than 24 years. Miss York said that due to excesses and the rise in insurance premiums, it was not worth making a claim. "My mum was literally ready to pack in, shut the door and just leave it all, bless her," she said. "They've had a really tough couple of years, price rises and everything else. This was like the tip of the iceberg, really." One regular customer said the couple do a great job with the community and the shop. "Everybody knows them," he said. "I think it's great that they've put some money forward to help them when they've lost the chocolate." A family involved in the horror cycling crash during the Commonwealth Games say they came close to a complete catastrophe that could have seriously injured or killed their two young children. On the final lap of a qualifying heat for the men's scratch race on Sunday, a high-speed collision involving several riders resulted in England's Matt Walls being catapulted over the barriers and into the crowd with his bike. The incident has led to calls from Sir Chris Hoy and Dame Laura Kenny for improvements to velodrome safety, with Hoy saying it is a disgrace that there are not protective screens at venues. Walls flew into the front two rows of the stands where Hugh Colvin was sitting with his two younger children, aged 5 and 7, and some family friends. It all happened so incredibly quickly at the speed the cyclists were going. You could see the trajectory of the bike. It came through, grazed my daughter's shoulder, and one of the photos you can see we are obviously underneath the wheel. I was facing the other way because I'd turned my head, but looking back at the photos, it must have been within centimetres, millimetres of our heads, and obviously close enough to graze my daughter." He added that where Wool's bike landed was in the two seats, where his 5-year-old son and his friend's son had been sitting before they moved back a row to get a better view. For Hugh's wife Laura, who was not at the velodrome, it has sunk in over the past few days how much worse it could have been. What has been quite hard for us to get our head around is being able to see from the photographs that were taken of the incident exactly how close this came to being a complete catastrophe, and how close our two younger children came to being seriously injured or killed, and that has been the main thing we've had to reflect on over the past few days. Contrary to any earlier statement from the organisers that no members of the public required hospital treatment, a friend who attended the event with the Colvins is awaiting surgery for a serious arm injury. He suffered a laceration to the bone, which the hospital have described as being like a machete injury. It's been really difficult for him. He's still waiting for surgery. In addition to the soft tissue and muscle injury, he's got a partially severed tendon in his arm, so it is the start of a long road to recovery for him. They said the three children were deeply concerned about the condition of the three cyclists: Walls, the Isle of Man's Matt Bostock, and Canada's Derek Gee, who went to hospital after the crash. On Monday, Walls video called the Colvin's daughter, which they said was a massive step forward in helping her come to terms with what she had seen. The Colvins praised the quick response of volunteers, paramedics and team coaches who helped them in the aftermath of the crash. However, the family want the incident to trigger a review of velodrome safety, to give them the reassurance that no family is ever going to find themselves in our situation. They said they were completely unaware that a cyclist had ever flown off the track before. "If we had known for a moment that there was a risk that a bike with an adult male going at that speed could come into contact with my 7-year-old daughter, my family would have never been there." Bostock, who is still hoping to compete in Sunday's road race, told BBC Sport, "There has to be something done because it's going down as a freak accident, but it has happened before. I don't know how many freak accidents become a normal accident. I dread to think if it had been worse, it should have been a proactive decision to try and make it safer before it's a accident." A Birmingham 2022 spokesperson said they have been in regular contact with the Colvin family and apologised for any upset the initial wording of their statement had caused. They said a full and detailed accident investigation is already underway and will pass on our findings on to the relevant parties. Sean Dawson, Chief Executive of Lee Valley Regional Park Authority, said the venue complies with international regulations and that an accident of this kind has never taken place there before. He added, "We appreciate that this was a shocking experience for those involved and we offer our heartfelt best wishes to all those involved." Hello and welcome to the News by Standards. A plan to use oral contraceptives to control grey squirrel populations in the UK is making good progress and could soon be put to the test in field trials, say government scientists. The mass birth control plan involves luring grey squirrels into feeding boxes only they can access using pots containing hazelnut spread. These will be spiked with contraceptives. The project could help eradicate the grey squirrel in the UK without killing them, says Environment Minister Lord Benyon. It should reduce the untold damage grey squirrels do to woodland, ecosystems and native red squirrel populations, he says. The government scientist leading the research says the contraceptive, which makes both male and female grey squirrels infertile, should be ready to deploy in the wild within 2 years. Grey squirrels, first introduced from North America in the late 19th century, damage UK woodlands by stripping bark from trees to get at the nutritious sap beneath. The species has flourished in the UK. There are now reckoned to be 2.7 million grey squirrels here. The animals target young trees, typically 10 to 50 years old, and favour broadleaf species including oak, beech, sweet chestnut and sycamore. They can kill or maim trees, leaving scarring that allows an entry point for other tree pests and diseases which can stunt their growth. The damage they can do threatens the effectiveness of government efforts to tackle climate change by planting tens of thousands of hectares of new woodlands, says the Environment Minister Lord Goldsmith. Grey squirrels have also driven the UK's native red squirrel to the verge of extinction across much of the country. There are thought to be just 160,000 red squirrels left in the UK, with only 15,000 remaining in England. Grey squirrels are significantly larger and stronger than reds and carry a squirrel pox virus that is deadly to reds but to which they are immune. The traditional way of managing the grey squirrel population is by culling them, but grey squirrels breed rapidly and populations can recover quickly. A century of culling programs has failed to reduce the population. Dosing the animals with a contraceptive drug is a more humane alternative and will ultimately be more effective, says the lead scientist on the project, Dr. Giovanna Massi from the government's Animal and Plant Health Agency, APHA. She says her team have developed a vaccine that prompts the immune system to restrict the production of sex hormones, which leaves both male and female squirrels infertile. The drug is not permanent and further tests are now being carried out to find a dose that has a long-lasting effect and is safe to use in the wild. The team have also developed a special feeding hopper with a weighted door designed to keep out species other than squirrels. Trials in Yorkshire and Wales showed 70% of squirrels in each wood visited the bait boxes over a 4-day period. The only other animals that got in were 2 particularly enterprising mice. The plan is to bait the hoppers with pots of a hazelnut paste greys find irresistible and which will be laced with the new contraceptive. The scientists are also exploring special feeders to be used in areas where there are both red and grey squirrels. These will be triggered by a plate which weighs the animals and only lets the heavier greys get access to the bait. Dr. Massey says computer modelling shows the contraceptive method could bring grey squirrel populations to the brink of extinction in some places. It could even eradicate them from certain areas, provided you can do a coordinated control over an area so they don't start to re-immigrate, Dr. Massey says. If the work with grey squirrels is successful, they believe similar techniques could be used to help control the population of other invasive mammals, including rats, mice, deer and wild boar. The research is being funded by the UK Squirrel Accord, a partnership of forestry and conservation organisations. It has raised just over £1 million to cover the research and development of the project. The contraceptive scheme is an important additional non-lethal tool for managing grey squirrels, says Kay Hoare, the director of the UKSA. Red squirrels now only survive in island ecosystems where there aren't any grey squirrels or where a red squirrel community group are working hard to keep back the grey squirrels, she says. The financial cost of the damage grey squirrels do is estimated at £37 million a year in England and Wales alone. The cost to the UK's biodiversity has not yet been calculated. A mature oak tree can support up to 2,000 other species. The initiative has wide support, including from the Prince of Wales, who was instrumental in the setting up of the UKSA. The animal rights pressure group People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals says if population control has to be implemented, it backs non-lethal options. But it cautions we mustn't forget that grey squirrels and other species deemed invasive are where they are, though through no fault of their own and entirely due to human carelessness, and they deserve to be left in peace. The broadcaster and naturalist Chris Packham believes a species-specific oral contraceptive could be a dream ticket if it proves to be economically viable and practical. He describes the project as non-violent, direct action to control a widespread and extremely numerous invasive animal, and suggests an effort should also be made to encourage pine martens back into their previous haunts, across the country. These predatory mammals are native UK species that have suffered historic persecution, have been known to reverse the spread of invasive grey squirrels in Scotland and Northern Ireland. Telecoms regulator Ofcom has been urged to do more to help broadband and mobile customers who pay a loyalty penalty for staying with their provider. Some long-standing customers pay more than new customers for the same service, and Citizens Advice wants action taken. In 2021, Ofcom estimated switching could save people £83 a year on mobile bills and £61 on broadband. A Citizens Advice survey of 3,087 UK people suggested up to 1 in 7 may be paying a loyalty penalty. Citizens Advice told BBC News the survey suggested 1 in 3 broadband customers and 1 in 10 mobile customers with bundle contracts who pay for their handset and airtime together could be affected. Stopping the penalty, it argues, will make a big difference to hard-pressed households. Ofcom said that since it had introduced new rules requiring providers to send prompts to shop around, the number of out-of-contract broadband customers has fallen by more than 1 million. It also said overpayment among mobile customers with bundled contracts had dropped by 100 million after operators committed to cut prices when initial contracts end. The regulator also requires companies to give details of their best annual deals to customers who stay with them without taking a new contract. Citizens Advice analysed 165,000 budgets of people who came to it for debt help. Its findings suggested that those with the lowest incomes spent almost double the proportion of their income on telecoms when compared to the highest earners. The charity cited the example of Tracy, who it said it's reliant on disability benefits. According to Citizen Advice, she signed up to a £30 a month package which included TV, landline, broadband and international calls in 2006. In January, she started going through her bills looking for potential savings and found its cost has risen to £80. Everything is going up: gas, electric, food, and I have a mortgage to pay. I shop late in the evenings to get yellow sticker discount food. I turn off my gas as I can't afford to repair the boiler or use the heating, and I don't go anywhere other than my hospital appointments, she told Citizens Advice. New customers pay £50 less than me for the same deal. I've paid nearly £3,000 more for being a loyal customer. How on earth can they justify me paying so much, especially as I was with them for 16 years? Mike Emmett, who runs training for advisors at Citizens Advice Cardiff and Vale, said many people see their mobile and broadband as a lifeline. They need them to speak to people and do things like manage their universal credit account and help children with their homework. He said many people were reluctant to switch out of fear of rocketing the boat, particularly because of the prospect of credit checks. It's so frustrating when we see people who are on the lowest incomes paying the loyalty penalty as they're forced to jump through so many hoops to try and sort it out. In January, the Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, effectively ended gradual year-on-year increases, so-called price walking, the car and home insurance, by requiring companies to automatically switch their customers to better deals. Citizens Advice is looking for similar action from other regulators. Ofcom said its focus was on making sure customers can get the best deal. It said switching to a new deal with an existing one ends can result in significant savings, and that it had taken action to make the process simpler and quicker. A one-touch switch system is also due to be introduced in April 2023. Ofcom added there is also a moral imperative on providers to support out-of-contract customers suffering a financial hardship, and it's vital they do all they can to help them secure a deal that is more affordable. In February, Ofcom found that 4.2 million households could halve broadband bills by taking up social tariffs, low-cost deals offered by broadband firms to people on low incomes, but only 55,000 homes had in fact done so. Ofcom wants firms to promote these deals more widely. The Internet Service Providers Association, a UK trade body representing many broadband firms, said industry efforts had led to more customers than ever switching. It said its members were determined to help customers through the cost of living crisis and urged those struggling with bills to contact their provider. New research shows that rainwater in most locations on Earth contains levels of chemicals that greatly exceed safety levels. These synthetic substances, called PFAS, are used in non-stick pans, firefighting foam, and water-repellent clothes. Dubbed forever chemicals, they persist for years in the environment. Such is their prevalence now that scientists say there is no safe space on Earth to avoid them. The researchers from Stockholm University say it is vitally important that the use of these substances is rapidly restricted. Scientists fear PFAS may pose health risks, including cancer, though research has so far been inconclusive. They have been growing increasingly concerned about the proliferation of PFAS in recent years. PFAS stands for poly and perfluoroalkyl substances. There are around 4,500 of these fluorine-based compounds, and they're found in almost every dwelling on Earth in hundreds of everyday products, including food packaging, non-stick cookware, rain gear, adhesives, paper, and paints. Safety concerns about the presence of these long-lasting substances in drinking water has also been raised. Earlier this year, a BBC investigation found PFAS in water samples in England England at levels that exceeded European safety levels, but did not exceed the current safety level in England and Wales. This new study, which looks at 4 specific chemicals in the class, suggests that levels of 1 PFAS in rainwater around the globe often greatly exceeds US drinking water advisory levels. Soil around the world is similarly contaminated, evidence suggests. The study's findings lead the authors to conclude that a planetary boundary has been crossed, that there simply is no safe space on Earth to avoid these substances. We argue here that we're not within this safe operating space anymore, because we now have these chemicals everywhere, and these safety advisories, we can't achieve them anymore, said Professor Ian Cousins, the lead author from Stockholm University. I'm not saying that we're all going to die of these effects, but we're in a place now where you can't live anywhere on the planet and be sure that the environment is safe. While this is undoubtedly cause for concern, there are some provisos. Many of these safety levels in place are advisory, meaning they are not legally enforceable. Other scientists take the view that action on these chemicals should wait until the health risks are more clearly proven. Much research has been carried out on the health risks posed by PFAS, and scientists say that exposure to high levels may be associated with increased risk of some cancers, fertility issues, and developmental delays in children. However, such association don't prove cause and effect, and other studies have found no connection between PFAS and disease. But for those who have spent years working closely with PFAS, the evidence in the new research paper underlines the need for a precautionary approach. In this background rain, the levels are higher than those environmental criteria already, so that means that over time we're going to get a statistically significant impact of those chemicals on human health, said Professor Crispin Halsall from the University of Lancaster. He was not involved with the Swedish study, and how that will manifest itself, I'm not sure, but it's going to come out over time because we're exceeding those concentration levels, which are going to cause some harm because of exposure to humans in their drinking water. Removing the chemicals in the study from drinking water at treatment plants is possible but expensive, but getting below the US advisory levels is extremely challenging, according to the authors. As scientists have gained more knowledge about PFAS over the past 20 years, the safety advisories have been continuously lowered. This has also happened with regard to the presence of these chemicals in soil, and that too is causing problems. In the Netherlands in 2018, the Infrastructure Ministry set new limits on concentrations of PFAS in soil and dredging material, but this caused 70% of buildings projects involving soil removal or using excavated materials to be halted. After protest, the government relaxed the guidelines. According to the new study, this type of relaxation of safety levels is likely to happen with water contamination as well. If you applied those guidelines everywhere, you wouldn't be able to build anywhere, said Professor Ian Cousins. I think they'll do the same with the US drinking water advisories because there's not a practical way of applying it. It's not because there's anything wrong with the risk assessment, it's just because you can't apply those things. It's just impossible from an economic viewpoint to apply any of these guidelines. The key challenge with these chemicals is their persistence rather than their toxicity, say the study authors. While some harmful PFAS were phased out by manufacturers 2 decades ago, they persist in water, air, and soil. One way PFAS cycle through the environment is in the form of tiny particles carried in sea spray into the air and then back to land. This inability to break down in the environment means that PFAS are now found even in remote areas of the Antarctic, as reported by Professor Halsall recently. While there are moves at European levels to restrict the uses of these chemicals and to find more benign replacements, there are also hopes that industry will quickly move away from using PFAS. We do not need persistent chemicals and substances. We want our products to last a long time while we use them. And while there are conservative voices in industry, there are progressive actors too. I'm very optimistic when I see these progressive industries working together. Sanctioned Russian oligarchs from Vladimir Putin's inner circle have exploited a UK secrecy loophole left open by the government. Arkady and Boris Rotenberg, judo partners of the Russian president, used a type of company that was not required to identify its real owners. Ministers have acknowledged concerns that these companies, known as English Limited Partnerships, ELPs, have also been abused by criminals. A joint investigation by the BBC and Finance Uncovered has discovered evidence linking a number of ELPs to fraud, terrorism, and money laundering. In 2016 and 2017, the government introduced measures that forced almost all UK companies to identify their real owners. ELPs were not covered by these new transparency laws. Since then, more than 4,500 of them have been set up. The BBC has worked with Finance Uncovered to analyse leaked documents and thousands of company records that show how ELPs have become a route to dodge anti-money laundering laws laws requiring the real owners or persons of significant control of UK companies to be disclosed. ELPs are legitimately used in real estate, investment and pension funds. They have tax advantages, for example, and the amount investors risk is limited. Unlike most companies, ELPs do not have a separate legal entity. The government says that means they cannot own assets, do not have a beneficial owner, and cannot legally open bank accounts in their own right. But our investigation has found documents identifying beneficial owners of ELPs and evidence of their use to open bank accounts and to facilitate financial crime. According to Graham Barrow, an expert in financial crime, they are also vulnerable to misuse because of how little information about their activity they are required to make public. Their data shows the number of new ELPs being set up has gone up by 53% since 2017. I wish I could be shocked about the scale of this, but I'm absolutely not. I'm just depressed and frustrated, says Helena Wood, head of the UK Economic Crime Programme at the Royal United Services Institute. The investigation also reveals leaked documents show ELPs were marketed as an alternative solution to avoid transparency laws. Just 5 companies known as formation agencies have been responsible for 1,500 ELPs, with hundreds listed at registered addresses, including one above a burrito bar in central London. A 71-year-old Swiss ceramic artist used in official paperwork to hide the real owners of UK companies was a signatory for more than 160 ELPs. FBI agents investigating the Boston Marathon bombing proved an ELP registered at an address currently home to a barber shop in Bristol. More than 4,500 ELPs have been created in the 5 years since the new transparency laws came into effect. In the 5 years to 2017, 2,950 were set up. We have established that among those to take advantage of the secrecy of ELPs are members of President Putin's inner circle. These are brothers Arkady and Boris Rotenberg, who were the subject of an investigation by US Senate committee in 2020. It said they had exploited a global web of shell companies to evade US sanctions imposed following the annexation of Crimea in 2014. These companies were used to buy millions of dollars worth of art. One of these companies was an ELP. Sinara Company LP was set up in January 2017 and listed its principal place of business at an address a stone's throw from London's Oxford Circus. It claimed to be involved in tourism and ticketing services. Between July 2017 and June 2018, it sent 14 wire transfers in $9,500 increments totaling $133,000 to an art advisor who the Senate report said facilitated purchases for the Rotenbergs. Under UK law, there is no requirement to disclose who was behind Sinara, which was dissolved in 2019. It's a scandal that people like the Rotenbergs, who have been sanctioned in America for years, have still been able to use British corporate structures to bring their money out of Russia through these structures and then spend it at will, says Labour MP Dame Margaret Hodge, who chairs a parliamentary group on tax and corruption. The BBC tried to contact the Rotenbergs but have not yet received the response. Most limited partnerships are set up by so-called company formation agents or presenters who provide a registered address and administrative support. The BBC and Finance Uncovered found that of the 4,500 ELPs formed since 2017, 1 in 4 were created by just 5 UK-based agencies. These agencies have track records in creating anonymous UK companies for clients in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. Some of those companies they incorporated have also been linked to financial crimes, including money laundering. Corporate records show the most prolific of these agencies is LAS, run by Elena Dovzik, an Anglo-Russian accountant, and her Latvian business partner, Anita Utinan, the UK-based businesswoman who have made millions from LAS, the activities of which include forming and administrating hundreds of anonymous British companies for clients based across Eastern Europe and Central Asia. A number of companies associated with LAS have subsequently been involved in crime. One, Always Efficient LLP, a firm registered to a London address provided by LAS, was found to be behind BTC-E, the largest Russian language Bitcoin exchange. The exchange was shut down in 2017 by the US Justice Department in relation to allegations of money laundering. And last year, the Phase.com website, which used the LAS contact address, was alleged to have run a Russian coordinated vaccine disinformation campaign, spreading claims that the AstraZeneca vaccine would turn recipients into chimpanzees. LAS told the BBC that they terminated their services to Always Efficient LAP in 2017 due to their breach of our terms and conditions. In relation to Phase.com, LAS said they could be an illegal and unauthorized use of our address services as we do not hold exact or similar details in our historic database. LAS was also responsible for setting up huge numbers of anonymous another type of UK company called Scottish Limited Partnerships SLP. A 2017 investigation by Bellingcat found that LAS was the single most prolific presenter of SLPs between 2015 and 2017. SLPs at the time did not have to disclose their real owners, but after they were repeatedly linked to major international money laundering scandals, the UK government changed the law so they had to provide information about those who ultimately owned or controlled them. Almost immediately, the number of registrations fell by almost half. After this change in the law around SLPs, leaked documents seen by the BBC show LAS switched its attentions to ELPs. In an emailed update, clients dated the 18th of May 2017, under the heading Alternative Solutions, LAS proposed ELPs as a way out and as a substitute for Scottish partnerships. The document discovered in the Pandora Papers, a data leak obtained by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, continued, for the time being, the privileges of this type of partnerships are that they are not and will not be subject to the laws of the disclosure of information about the controlling pensions. Now our investigation has discovered the involvement of a number of ELPs associated with LAS in alleged criminal activity. They include companies owned by ELP Danea Business LP, which have been accused of evading tax in Ukraine, and another ELP called Kosalima Trade LP, controlled by a Russian businessman wanted by the authorities in Russia in relation to a £5 million fraud. LAS boss Alina Dovnik said, "We are aware that many years ago we filed registration documents for some companies that eventually were accused on unlawful activities, but such information was not available to us prior to registration. We have never been involved in any business activities of our former clients and only assisted our corporate clients with their company's formation process, mail forwarding services and statutory filings. We never supported any kind of fraud or illegal activities." She explained that her firm had enhanced due diligence for all international clients, and if any of our clients was ever reported to us as being under suspicion of being involved in unlawful activities, services were terminated with immediate effect. Both Danea Business LP and Kosalima Trade LP were registered to addresses provided by LAS in London. Kosalima Trade LP was registered at the second floor of 6 Marketplace in premises above an unrelated burrito bar in Fitzrovia, central London. This address is home to around 800 active companies, is one of the most frequently used addresses for ELPs in the country. Over the past 5 years, more than 240 ELPs have been registered here. A scrap of paper inserted into a button on the intercom lists just one company at the address, 1000 Apostles Ltd, which is owned by LAS Inita Itinan. LAS says its lease for 6 Marketplace expired during this year. Another popular address for ELPs is not in London, but in Bristol. Number 1 Straits Parade in the Fish Ponds area of the city is now a Turkish barber shop. It has also been an address used by Iran, another formation agent to set up UK companies, including 197 ELPs. Companies registered at the address have been linked to bribery, fraud and other financial crimes. Our investigation has discovered that Rivalum ELP, an ELP that was registered there in 2013, was also flagged during the FBI inquiry into the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing in the US. Rivalum LP was identified in suspicious activity reports produced by Dutch Bank and handed to federal agents as part of the investigation into financial transactions associated with those responsible for the bombings. The reports from a leak of suspicious activity reports filed with the US Treasury, known as the FinCEN files, do not identify who owned the ELP, but they record its involvement in 116 suspicious transactions totaling over $7.3 million in just 1 month between December 2012 and January 2013. The BBC tried to contact the owners of Iran but received no response. While addresses like number 1 Straits Parade and 6 Marketplace may indicate which formation agency has been involved with an ELP, they give little clue as to who is really behind them. While names of the partners of the ELP can be found on paperwork submitted to Companies House, more often than not the names will be of anonymous companies incorporated in countries including Belize and the Seychelles, and even the real people signing paperwork for those companies are unlikely to be the true owners. Typically they are a nominee or proxy signatories paid to sign documents, and they usually know nothing about the company is doing. One prolific proxy signatory is Ruth Neidhart, a 71-year-old from Switzerland who lives in Cyprus. She also works as a ceramic artist, making porcelain dolls and jewelry, sometimes arranging pottery painting sessions for children's birthday parties. The analysis of Company House filings has found since 2016 she has signed paperwork for more than 160 ELPs set up by the company formation agency she worked for, iOS. Ms. Neidhart did not respond to the BBC's investigation to comment. The investigation has also found one of the LAS's most prolific nominees is Alex Alexander Turner, a Romanian national in his early 30s who lives in London. Mr. Turner has signed Companies House paperwork for at least 306 ELPs created by LAS for clients. Responding to written questions from the BBC, Mr. Turner says his involvement was arranged through LAS International or a related company for and on behalf of owners of all individual companies with whom he had trusted nominee service agreements. He adds, "We have never been involved in the control or management of any company mentioned in your letters." Campaigners say the BBC's revelations about ELPs show that reform of the UK's legal structures is long overdue. "We've been warning the government about these problems with these opaque legal structures for years," says Helena Wood of the Royal United Services Institute think tank. "Transparency is the best disinfectant, they say, and we need a bucket load of it with these English limited partnerships. The failure of successive British governments to shut down major loopholes in anti-money laundering laws stands in contrast to promises made by senior politicians. As long ago as 2014, the government considered acting on ELPs, but failed to do so. The following year, the Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, declared he was determined that the UK would not become a safe haven for corrupt money around the world. The government acknowledged in 2018 that there were risks posed by limited partnerships and concerns that they are being abused by criminals following large-scale money laundering scandals. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Boris Johnson said he wanted to open up the matrix sheet doll of Russian-owned companies to reveal their true owners. The government says it does not have any evidence of significant misuse of ELPs. A government spokesperson said the UK already has some of the strongest controls in the world to combat money laundering, and it's vital that we continue to upgrade our governance to crack down on criminals abusing UK corporate entities. That's why we are modernising the UK governing UK limited partnerships through our forthcoming economic crime bill, which will tighten registration requirements and improve transparency, ensuring that only those acting within the law can make on the UK register. But those proposals do not appear to include closing the ELP loophole, requiring the disclosure of the real owners or persons of significant control behind the companies. Hospital leaders are concerned by the government's decision not to offer junior doctors in England the same pay rise as other NHS staff. Junior doctors are entitled to a 2% annual pay rise as part of a 4-year deal, but other staff are getting 4.5%. NHS providers representing trusts in England says this undermines morale in an already overstretched workforce. The Department of Health and Social Care says junior doctors' pay will be looked at next year. It maintains the current pay deal, which ends then, provides the most experienced junior doctors with higher pay, and increases allowances for those working the most weekends. But junior doctors say the strain of working through the worst of the pandemic has not eased, and the pay decision is deeply unfair. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have separate deals with junior doctors and have offered pay rises more in line with other staff. The British Medical Association, BMA, the main union representing all doctors, says industrial action is inevitable if the government does not change its stance. One junior doctor told BBC News the 2% offer is just a slap in the face. Doctors are working long nights, shifts, saving people's lives for not much more than minimum wage. We also have exams and training that is mandatory that we have to pay for with this paltry salary. And after 6 years of medical school, we have huge student debts as well. Another said, "I don't understand why the junior doctors were left out of the higher pay award. They will use some excuse that it was some pre-arranged pay deal, but that had a caveat that if there was a drastic change in circumstances, then this would be reviewed. Surely COVID and inflation of 9% should be considered drastic." A third, who graduated from medical school 5 years ago, said, "I'm a new dad, and with the cost of living crisis, we're struggling to make ends meet. It's not right that full-time working professionals deal with these conditions. It is driving people away from the profession." Junior doctors, which includes anyone who has finished medical school but not yet become a consultant, say their wages have fallen for several years running in real terms once inflation is accounted for. First-year junior doctors currently earn £14.13 an hour, assuming a 40-hour week, but they regularly work much longer hours. Many cited poor working conditions where sickness and burnout meant a junior doctor was often doing the work of 2 or 3 doctors in a shift without the necessary guidance and support. Dr. Sarah Hallett and Dr. Mike Kemp, who jointly chair the BMA Junior Doctors Committee, said overworked, underpaid and undervalued junior doctors cannot and will not tolerate being ignored any longer, and ministers are seemingly oblivious to the crisis in front of them. They are angry, and an extraordinary committee meeting has been called to review next steps. There is intense pressure across the health system. Patients cannot be quickly admitted to hospital because of crowded accident and emergency departments, and delays transferring patients from ambulances due to a shortage of staff and beds. Problems with social care prevent some medically fit patients from being discharged and sent back to their communities. NHS providers interim chief executive Saffron Cordery said trust leaders are frustrated and concerned by the decisions to exclude junior doctors and other specific staff groups from the recent NHS pay award. Like so many people, junior doctors are being hit hard by the cost of living crisis. Trust leaders are seeing firsthand how the decision to award pay increases to some staff and not others is undermining staff morale, seeding unnecessary division at a time when the workforce is already hugely overstretched, and it is a struggle to recruit and retain staff. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has made the point multi-year pay awards are part of the Treasury's long-term public spending plans, and unpicking them is not straightforward and could set a precedent for other public sector workers. Pay awards are based on what you expect to happen to inflation, and then if inflation turns out lower than expected, the workers do better. But if inflation is higher than expected, they do worse. Ben Zaranko, an economist at the Institute, has said. A Department of Health and Social Care official said junior doctors are already in a pre-existing multi-year pay and contract reform deal which ends next year. This will be the right time to consider pay. Hello and welcome to the News by Standards. Heathrow Airport has apologised to passengers caught up in recent travel chaos, but has warned that more flights could be cancelled this summer. In addition, the UK's largest airport has asked airlines to remove 61 flights from Monday's schedules as it seeks to cope with soaring demand. It is the latest schedule intervention Heathrow has undertaken. Heathrow boss John Holland Kay said the airport would request further action if necessary. Tens of thousands of passengers have been affected by disruption at UK airports and flight cancellations in recent months as the industry struggles to recruit staff after shedding jobs during COVID lockdowns. The problem was particularly bad during Easter and the Platinum Jubilee and school half-term holidays. The government and the aviation regulator wrote to carriers last month telling them to ensure their summer timetables were deliverable. Heathrow has apologised to passengers affected by long queue times, delays for passengers with reduced mobility, bags not travelling with passengers, or arriving late at times in recent weeks. But it insisted most passengers had a good level of service, despite resourcing challenges at the airport, airlines, ground handlers, and government agencies. Mr. Holland Kay said, "I am very proud of the way that our team is rising to the challenge of growth and giving excellent service to the vast majority of passengers. However, we have already seen times recently when demand exceeds the capacity of the airport, airlines, and ground handlers. We will review the schedule changes that airlines have submitted in response to the government's requirement to minimise disruption for passengers this summer, and will ask them to take further action if necessary." Heathrow said it had asked airlines to remove 61 flights from Monday's schedules because more passengers are expected in Terminals 3 and 5 than the airport can currently serve. Previous schedule interventions happened following problems with the baggage system and because more passengers were expected than security staffing could cope with. Heathrow said nearly 6 million passengers used the airport in June. The entire aviation sector has struggled to bounce back from the pandemic, during which it cut thousands of jobs as the industry ground to a halt. Now that travel has resumed, airlines are seeking to put on almost as many flights as they did before COVID, while finding it difficult to rehire workers. According to aviation analytics firm Cerium, the number of last-minute flight cancellations from the UK was up 188% in June 2022 compared to June 2019 before the pandemic. Last month, the Department for Transport and the Civil Aviation Authority wrote a joint letter to carriers telling them to cancel flights they cannot deliver this summer. They added that earlier cancellations were better than axing flights at the last minute. Last week, British Airways said it was cutting 10,300 more short-haul flights due to feature in its schedule between August and the end of October. This latest announcement affecting Heathrow, Gatwick and City airports means nearly 30,000 flights will have to be removed from BA's schedule between April and October this year. Other airlines have also announced cancellations over the busy summer period. Low-cost European carrier Wizz Air has said it will reduce its peak summer flight program in an effort to avoid flight cancellations and delays. The Hungarian airline said it would trim its capacity by a further 5%. Industry bosses have urged the government to allow them to recruit workers from overseas as one potential fix to staff shortages. Writing in the Sunday Times, Philip Joing, Group Chief Executive of Menzies Aviation, said ministers should add aviation workers to the shortage occupation list as the country enters the peak travel season. Last month, it was reported that this plea has been rejected by the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. Kim Marsh has been announced as the second contestant to be taking part in this year's Strictly Come Dancing. The actress and TV presenter currently hosts BBC One's Morning Live and has appeared in Coronation Street and The Syndicate. "I'm nervous, but I'm really looking forward to it," she mentioned on BBC Breakfast on Thursday. She joins actor Will Mellor, who was announced as one of this year's contestants earlier. The dancing competition is set to return to BBC One in September. In the early noughties, Marsh was a member of pop group Hearsay, who were created on talent show Popstars. It's been a long time since I've been on stage, performing in what kind of way, so it's going to be really tricky, but I'm up for the challenge. Asked how she would deal with criticism from the judges, she said, "Listen, I was judged by Nasty Nigel in Popstars. He was the villain back in the day, so I think I'll be fine with it." Miller, who was announced earlier on Thursday, is known for appearing in Hollyoaks, Coronation Street Casualty, and 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps. The actor said he was honestly so chuffed to be taking part in Strictly Come Dancing. "It's getting a bit frightening now," Miller told BBC Breakfast about taking part in the show. Asked if he could dance well, he replied, "It depends what you call well. I dance in the kitchen or at parties like anybody does, but nothing at all like I'm doing here. I'm way out my comfort zone." He explained, "My mindset completely changed a while back and I just thought I've got to start doing things that frighten me. I lost my dad in 2020 and from then on I just thought I've just got to grab life, I've got to create new memories." Miller reached number 5 in the UK singles chart with When I Need You in 1998. He recently toured the UK with a live version of the popular podcast he co-hosts with Ralph Little, 2 Pints with Will and Ralph. Craig Revel-Horwood, Motsi Mabuse and head judge Shirley Ballas will all return to the Strictly judging panel this year. They will be joined once again by Anton de Beck, who is now permanently taken over from Bruno Tonioli. The second contestant will be announced on BBC Breakfast later on Thursday morning. Almost 10 years ago, James Howells threw away a hard drive during a clear out, forgetting about the Bitcoin on it. Now, with the Bitcoin worth an estimated £150 million, he's planning to spend millions digging up a Newport landfill in a bid to find the lost hard drive. If recovered, Mr. Howell said he would give 10% of the proceeds to turn the city into a cryptocurrency hub, but the council said excavating the site would pose an ecological risk. Mr. Howells, an IT engineer, accidentally threw away the hard drive in 2013 after mining 8,000 bitcoins in the early stages of the currency's development. Bitcoin fluctuates widely in value. In January 2021, Mr. Howells was worth around 210 million, but with a big crash coming earlier this year, it is now significantly less. Newport Council, which owns the site Mr. Howells believes the drive is in, has repeatedly denied him access to dig the site on the grounds of environmental and access concerns. Mr. Howells has now pledged about 10% of the proceeds of the drive should it be recovered to fund a range of crypto-based projects. Any projects to dig for the drive would require a huge manual task of digging through thousands of tons of compacted landfill that have been accumulated at the site for decades. But Mr. Howells believes he now has the funding and expertise set up to do it in an effective way and environmentally beneficial way for the site. Digging up a landfill is a huge operation in itself. The funding has been secured. We've brought on an AI specialist. Their technology can easily be retrained to search for a hard drive. We've also got an environment team on board. We've basically got a well-rounded team of various experts with various expertise, which when we all come together are capable of completing this task to a very high standard. Finding the hard drive, though, is just part of the monumental task. There's no guarantee that if it is there, it is even in a recoverable state. But if it is, then its owner is set for a mega money windfall, although the actual amount will depend on which direction the volatile cryptocurrency goes in. Either way, it's likely to be many millions of pounds. But the 37-year-old, who has signed away some of the ownership of the coins as part of the funding process, said his donation to the city would be used to promote the use and understanding of cryptocurrency. "We've got a whole list of incentives of good cases we'd like to do for the community," he added. "One of the things we'd like to do on the actual landfill site, once we've cleaned it up and recovered that land, is put a power generation facility, maybe a couple of wind turbines. We'd like to set up a community-owned Bitcoin mining facility, which is using that clean electricity to create Bitcoin for the people of Newport." Among his other plans are proposals to give £50 worth of Bitcoin to every person in the city and install crypto-based terminals in all shops. Newport Council said it repeatedly responded to Mr. Howell's requests for access to the site. "We have statutory duties which we must carry out in managing the landfill site," a spokesman said. "Part of this is managing the ecological risk to the site and the wider area. Mr. Howell's proposals pose significant ecological risks which we cannot accept and indeed are prevented from considering by the terms of our permit." Hello and welcome to the News by Standards. Former Trump strategist Steve Bannon has told the House Select Committee investigating the 6th of January Capitol riots that he is willing to testify according to US media. Until now, he had refused to cooperate with the hearing. In a letter seen by CBS News, his lawyer told the committee that Mr. Bannon is willing to, indeed prefers to testify at your public hearing. Mr. Trump said the testimony would be in the best interests of Americans. The Select Committee has conducted a nearly year-long investigation into how Trump supporters invaded Congress on the 6th of January 2021 to disrupt lawmakers as they certified Democrat Joe Biden's election victory. Mr. Bannon was summoned to testify on what he knew about the events leading up to the riot, but until now he had refused to comply. He claims he was covered by executive executive privilege, a legal principle that protects many White House communications. However, at the time of the Capitol riots, Mr. Bannon was not an official advisor to the president, which the committee says means that executive privilege does not apply. Mr. Bannon's testimony, if it goes ahead, could offer new insights into Trump's inner circle in the hours leading up to and during the riots. According to the committee, the former Trump strategist had specific knowledge about the events planned for the 6th of January before they took place. Trump himself has become frustrated at the committee hearings, describing them as a one-sided witch hunt, and has given his support for Mr. Bannon's testimony. In a letter seen by the AP news agency, the former president said he was waiving executive privilege for you, which allows for you to go in and testify truthfully and fairly, as per the request of the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs and Hacks. However, the exact circumstances under which Mr. Bannon will testify have not yet been agreed. According to his lawyer Robert Costello, he wishes to appear before the committee in a public hearing, but standard procedure so far has been for testimony to be heard first in private interviews. We want to get all our questions answered, and you can't do that in a live format, committee member Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat, told CNN. Mr. Bannon is due to appear in court on the 18th of July on 2 charges of criminal contempt of Congress for previously refusing to testify and failing to submit documents. Hello and welcome to the News by Standards. Scientists hope patchworks of multicoloured crops will help hide them in plain sight from pests as a natural alternative to pesticides. Using dyes, the so-called camo cropping trial has been started by the Norwich-based British Beet Research Organisation. It has been introduced at Morley Farms near Wymondham, Norfolk, in an attempt to protect sugar beet from aphids. Farmer David Jones said pests can reduce yield by 50% in a bad year. Fields of sugar beet have been dyed different colours using food dye at the farm. Scientists hope to find out if the camo crops deter aphids from landing on the sugar beet, and if they do, which colours prove most effective. Mr. Jones from the Morley Agricultural Foundation said growing sugar beet was a challenge. He said the farm has to cope with lots of things all the time, principally the weather, but also weeds and particularly aphids come and attack crops and transfer virus into the crop. We're always looking for new ways to control the problems we've got. If it's without pesticides, then that can be beneficial to what we do, he said. Dr. Alistair Wright from the BBRO said he had used colour as a dye to reduce the contrast between the immature beet and the soil. He said we're trying any approaches to deter the aphids from the crop, and we know they use all sorts of sensors when they are migrating in the spring. One of them is colour and the contrast between the plant and soil, so using the dye we are hoping to effectively hide the crops in plain sight from the aphids. Dr. Wright said there were early positive signs, but added results would not be fully known until the harvest. He said the organisation was also trialling other methods, such as increasing ladybirds and planting a grass from New Zealand which releases chemicals that kill aphids. There's no silver bullet, no one thing we can rely on. Household energy bills will change every 3 months under new plans aimed at avoiding price shocks. Currently, the price cap, the maximum amount suppliers can charge their customers in England, Scotland and Wales, changes every 6 months. Energy regulator Ofgem says the change means price rises and falls will be passed on to customers more quickly. Energy bills soared in April and are expected to rise sharply again in October when the cap goes up. Ofgem said customers face a very challenging winter ahead and acknowledged the situation was deeply worrying for many people. In May, Ofgem said the typical household should expect to see an £800 increase to £2,800 a year, but it now says prices are looking higher than when it made that estimate. Industry analyst Cornwall Insight said the typical household was likely to pay £3,358 a year from October, then £3,615 a year from January, up from its previous estimate. In October 2021, the average bill was £1,400 a year. The price cap does not apply in Northern Ireland, but households there have also seen bills rise. Ofgem said updating the price cap more regularly would also help energy suppliers better predict how much energy they need to purchase for their customers. This in turn could help reduce the risk of more suppliers failing. Since early last year, more than 30 UK energy companies have failed after firms found themselves unable to pass on the full cost of soaring wholesale gas prices to their customers because of the price cap. Today's change will go some way to provide the stability needed in the energy market, reducing the risk of further large-scale supplier failures which cause huge disruptions and push up costs for consumers. It is not in anyone's interest for more suppliers to fail and exit the market, said Ofgem. But Simon Francis of the campaign group End Fuel Poverty Coalition said the decision was simply inhumane. Ultimately, this decision will force more people into fuel poverty in the middle of winter, causing additional stress on the NHS, and it may ultimately lead to increased levels of excess winter deaths this year. Only a full programme of emergency financial support, a rapid expansion of energy efficiency programmes, and a commitment to bringing more cheap renewable energy on stream will help people stay warm this winter and into the future. The energy price cap introduced in 2018 is based on the price energy suppliers pay producers for their electricity and gas. It sets the maximum supplier can charge per unit of energy and caps the level of profits an energy supplier can make. The cap has already been increased. Demand for gas rose after COVID restrictions eased, then prices soared again following the war in Ukraine. Russia is one of the world's biggest gas producers and has already cut supplies to some European countries. Meanwhile, Western nations have also moved to phase out Russian imports in response to the invasion. This has increased demand for other sources of energy, increasing global prices. Ofgem warned this means the price cap, which will be published at the end of August, would rise again, but by changing it every 3 months, any reductions in the wholesale price would be passed on more quickly to customers. It said paying a rate that is up to 6 months out of date in the current changeable market was no longer sustainable and could mean either consumers paying too much for months if wholesale prices have fallen, or suppliers left unable to supply gas with the money they are allowed to charge if prices have risen. Ofgem says it wants to cut the lag time between wholesale price changes and the amount customers are charged, which would limit the risk of suppliers going bust and pass on potential savings to consumers more quickly. So when wholesale prices are going down, that will mean you're not having to wait months before that money is taken off your bills. So far, so good. But the flip side is also true, and that's the position we're in right now. When wholesale prices are going up, that will get added onto the consumer's bills more quickly. That means sharper, more frequent shocks for the next, while as analysts are expecting global energy prices to drop anytime soon. More frequent changes will make it more difficult to budget, as prices will change every 3 months, and there's less time for suppliers to inform customers of changes, so increases really will come as a shock to some. So don't bank on this change saving you any money right now. As we head into the most difficult winter for a generation in terms of living costs, more than 3/4 of households in Britain now face an energy price rise in January too, when people can least afford it.
Hello and welcome to the News by Standards. Leaked files reveal how Uber lobbied top ministers at undeclared meetings while fighting restrictions to its ride-hailing service in the UK. Documents show then London Mayor Boris Johnson was the ultimate target of the lobbying strategy. Undeclared meetings with lobbyists expose loopholes in ministerial code, campaigners have said. The politicians say that lobbying rules were followed and that all business meetings were declared. A vast cache of 124,000 internal Uber records leaked to The Guardian and shared with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and BBC Panorama reveal how Uber lobbied top politicians for support as the firm bid to disrupt Europe's taxi industry and secure access to the lucrative UK market. In the UK, Uber's behind-the-scenes campaign went right to the top. The files record a series of meetings between the company, its lobbyists and senior members of the then government that went undeclared. They include meetings with the current Home Secretary Priti Patel, Tory leadership contender Sajid Javid, and recently sacked Cabinet Minister Michael Gove. The revelations are likely to prompt renewed concerns that regulatory proposals, which would have impacted Uber adversely in London, were dropped as government ministers put pressure on Boris Johnson. According to the files, Uber executives later reported that former Chancellor George Osborne considered himself responsible for the positive outcome. Sue Hawley, chief executive of the campaign group Spotlight on Corruption, said the meetings should have been declared. It certainly breaches the spirit of the rules, she says, although the rules were sufficiently ambiguous at the time that they may not have been in breach of the letter. This is a very controversial company, so I think in that context it is even more extraordinary that these meetings went undeclared by so many ministers, she adds. Since its arrival in London in 2012, Uber has been bitterly opposed by black cab drivers who see their fares being undercut and their livelihoods threatened. In 2014, parts of London were brought to a standstill by cab drivers in protest against the US tech firm. Mr. Johnson was reluctant to engage with Uber directly because the company was so controversial. Yet an internal Uber strategy document in 2014 identified London as critical to the firm's success and Mr. Johnson as the ultimate target of Uber's influential campaign. The mayor remains the central figure in London government. The need, therefore, is for a positive image of Uber to be conveyed to Boris by people that he trusts and respects. The Uber files reveal how that campaign worked. The documents show that in July 2014, Uber lobbyists visited 10 Downing Street to meet the then Prime Minister David Cameron's advisors. Lobbyists reported back to Uber getting useful intelligence on Mayor's office. According to the files, Uber lobbyists were confident their work would bear fruit. An email says that Mr. Cameron's senior staff are very with us. The documents show they also met current leadership hopeful Sajid Javid, then Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, and Matt Hancock, then Business Minister, during their visit to Number 10. A spokesperson for Mr. Javid said the relevant departments hold no record of the meeting said to have taken place. Mr. Hancock's spokesperson said it was the policy of government to attract tech companies to the UK, and all his efforts were above board and declared properly. The following month, Uber's controversial chief executive Travis Kalanick was invited to a small dinner with George Osborne, then Chancellor of the Exchequer, in California at the home of a senior Google executive. The invitation came from Rachel Whetstone, wife of Steve Hilton, who was strategy director at the time for Mr. Cameron. She had worked with him before at the TV company Carlton and Conservative HQ. At the time of the dinner, she was senior vice president of communications and public policy at Google, which also had a major investment in Uber. She moved to Uber the following year. A note from Uber's public policy chief Corey Owens to Mr. Kalanick makes it clear that the company regarded this as an opportunity to advance its cause with the Chancellor and not just a social occasion. It reads, "I think this is worth you doing. We were going to get you in front of Osborne when you're in London, but this is a more private affair, no hanger-on officials or staffers." Mr. Osborne didn't declare the meeting. "This is someone who is very personally known to the Prime Minister, opening doors to other ministers," Miss Hawley told the BBC. And I think that's really concerning, and it feeds perception that big business is setting the government agenda. That's really damaging to our democracy. Lawyers for Miss Whetstone said the dinner had been arranged and the then Chancellor's request to discuss innovation with leaders in Silicon Valley, and that she had never taken improper advantage of personal relationships with UK politicians. According to the Ministerial Code, it sets out what the UK government ministers should and shouldn't do. Ministers shown to have broken it are normally expected to resign. The 2010 version, which was in force when these meetings occurred, said ministers meet many people and organisations and consider a wider range of views as part of the formulation of government policy. Departments will publish at least quarterly details of ministers' external meetings. By 2015, London's Transport Authority, TfL, was considering a series of measures which would have significantly dented Uber's competitiveness and stifled its rapid growth, including a minimum 5-minute wait between booking a ride and pickup. At the time, Mr. Johnson, who as mayor had oversight of TfL, revealed how he'd been lobbied to go easy on Uber, writing that he had been deluged by rampant frothing free market conservatives opposed to tightening regulations on private hire vehicles. The files show Uber had continued targeting top Tories as well as Labour and Lib Dem MPs. That December, in a meeting that was declared, Sajid Javid met executives from Uber who reported that he was clearly a supporter. The same day, Mr. Javid met with Mr. Johnson and 2 other cabinet ministers, where he discussed TfL's proposals, according to emails obtained under the Freedom of Information Act and reported by the Daily Mail. Priti Patel, now Home Secretary, met with an Uber lobbyist in Paris in January 2016 when she was Minister of State for Employment. The meeting wasn't declared. The files show a follow-up letter from the minister proposing a partnership with Uber. A spokesperson for Ms. Patel said for official meetings such as this, civil servants are present and responsible for making the appropriate recordings. Also in January 2016, Michael Gove, then Secretary of State for Justice, met with Ms. Whetstone. By then, Uber's public policy chief, the meeting wasn't declared. A spokesman at Mr. Gove's former department said no official meeting took place in January 2016. That same month, TfL proposals, which would have hit Uber hardest, were shelved. Uber hailed it as a victory for common sense. When asked in the London Assembly if he had been subject to enormous lobbying by the government on Uber's behalf, the mayor said he did not deny that. The Uber files show that shortly after TfL proposals were shelved, Mr. Osborne met Travis Kalanick at the World Economic Forum conference in Davos, Switzerland. This time, the meeting was declared. George Osborne is a strong advocate, an Uber lobbyist noted in an email after that meeting. He liked to believe that he's responsible for the positive consultation outcome. A spokesperson for George Osborne said all business meetings where policy affecting individual companies were properly declared, adding that far from being secret, it was the government's publicly announced policy to meet tech businesses and persuade them to invest in Britain. The Uber files is a leak of 124,000 records, including emails and texts exposing conversations and meetings between Uber executives and public officials as the technology-driven taxi firm sought to expand its business. The files were leaked to The Guardian, which shared them with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists in Washington, D.C. and media partners in 29 countries, including the BBC's Panorama. The family of a 12-year-old boy, Archie Battersby, have sought legal permission to move him from the Royal London Hospital to a hospice. Miss Dance has said she wanted her son in a peaceful hospice to say goodbye privately. It comes after Wednesday's European Court of Human Rights, the EHCHR, decision to refuse an application to delay any changes to his treatment. Doctors have warned there is significant risk in moving him. Life-sustaining treatment, including mechanical ventilation and drug treatments for Archie, have been in place since April. It had been due to be withdrawn on Wednesday, but was delayed for the ECHR to consider his family's appeal. However, the EHCR said it would not interfere with the UK's court's rulings, paving the way for treatment to be stopped. Afterwards, Archie's mother, Holly Dance, said the legal battle to postpone the withdrawal of her son's life support was at the end. In a statement, Ms. Dance said, "I pray that the High Court will do the right thing. If they refuse permission for us to take him to a hospice and for him to receive palliative care, it will simply be inhumane and nothing about Archie's dignity. We will fight to the end for Archie's right to live." Speaking to Times Radio on Thursday, she also said, "It's absolutely heartbreaking. It's really taken its toll. We can't even have the chance to be in a room together as a family without nurses." She said the EHCR decision to refuse the application was another heartbreaking development. Lawyers for Barts Health NHS Trust, which runs the Royal London Hospital, had said in a letter to the family's legal team that any application to transfer Archie to a hospice would be opposed on both a procedural basis and best interest basis. The trust continues to put Archie's welfare and best interests at the forefront of its decision making about his care, the letter said. It believes that Archie's condition is unstable and that transferring him, even a short distance, involves significant risk. It added that the trust considered that the family were now at the end of the procedural options open to them and that any further delay is not in Archie's best interests. On that basis, it intended to withdraw Archie's treatment at 11 o'clock British Standard Time on Thursday unless any application over the hospice move was submitted. Miss Dance has said she wants her son in a peaceful hospice to say goodbye and spend time with his family uninterrupted by the noise and chaos. A spokeswoman for Archie's family said it was absolutely disgusting that the family were not even allowed to choose where Archie takes his final moments. She added that a hospice has said it would take him. A High Court order made in July requires that Archie remains at the Royal London Hospital while his treatment is withdrawn. The trust have said changes to Archie's treatment would not be made until legal issues were resolved. Archie was found unconscious at home in Southend-on-Sea in Essex on the 7th of April. His mother believed he may have been taking part in an online challenge at the time. Doctors had previously said it was highly likely he was brain dead, with no chance of recovery, and it was in his best interest for life support to end. A High Court judge said earlier that continuing treatment was futile. On Wednesday, in the latest in a series of court challenges, Archie's parents had argued the plan to withdraw treatment and ignore the concerns of a UN committee would breach a range of human rights safeguards, including right to life and right to a fair trial or hearing. But the ECHR said it considered the conditions of admissibility were not fulfilled. Court of Appeal judges had previously ruled Archie's life-sustaining treatment should not continue beyond 12 a.m. on Tuesday, but this was also delayed for an appeal process which was ultimately unsuccessful. A previous High Court ruling said every bodily function of Archie's is now maintained by artificial means, while another said he had not regained awareness at any time. So how did this story unfold? On the 7th of April 2022, Archie has been found unconscious by his mother after an accident in their home in Essex. He was taken to Southend Hospital. On the 8th of April, Archie is transferred to the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel, where he was treated ever since. On the 26th of April, the NHS Trust that runs the Royal London starts High Court proceedings, asking for Archie to undergo brain stem testing. On the 13th of May, Mrs. Justice Arbuthnot rules that brain stem testing should be carried out. On the 16th of May, two specialists tried to administer brain stem function tests, but they are unable to, as Archie did not respond to a peripheral nerve stimulation test, a precursor to the brain stem test. On the 25th of May, a hearing is held to decide if further MRI scans should be conducted. Archie's parents did not consent on the basis that moving Archie could harm him. On the 27th of May, the court approves further MRI scans, which are carried out on the 31st of May. Between the 6th and the 8th of June, a final hearing is held to hear evidence on whether Archie's life support treatment should continue. On the 13th of June, the High Court judge rules that Archie is dead based on MRI scans results and that treatment should be withdrawn. On the 20th of June, the family asked the Court of Appeal to reconsider the case. The 29th of June, the Court of Appeal says that a new hearing to determine Archie's best interests should take place. On the 11th of July, a new hearing is held in the High Court with evidence given before Mr. Justice Hayden. The 15th of July, Mr. Justice Hayden rules that life support treatment should end, saying continuing is futile. The 25th of July, 3 Court of Appeal judges support the High Court ruling that treatment can end. The 28th of July, the Supreme Court rules out intervening in the case and supports the Court of Appeal ruling. 29th of July, the family make an application to the United Nations. The 30th of July, a UN committee writes to the UK government asking for a delay in withdrawing treatment while they consider the case. The 31st of July, the government asks for an urgent hearing to review the case. The 1st of August, the Court of Appeal refuses to postpone withdrawal of treatment until the UN can hear the case. 2nd of August, the Supreme Court refused their family's application for permission to appeal the Court of Appeal ruling. And the 3rd of August, the family family submit an application to European Court of Human Rights in a bid to postpone the withdrawal of Archie's life support.
England's European champions have urged the Conservative Party leadership candidates to ensure every young girl can play football at school. The women's team beat Germany 2-1 at Wembley on Sunday to lift their first major trophy. It was also England's first since the men won the 1966 World Cup. In an open letter to Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, the 23-member Euro 2022 squad said this is an opportunity to make a huge difference, a change that will impact millions of young girls' lives. They added, "We ask you to make it a priority to invest into girls' football in schools so that every girl has the choice." The team highlighted only 63% of girls can play football in PE lessons, according to a Football Association campaign published last year. They also asked that all girls should have access to a minimum of 2 hours a week in PE. A report by England Football, part of the FA, claimed that only 44% of secondary schools in England offer girls equal access to football in PE lessons. A campaign spokesperson for Sunak said he had been inspired by the team, had already said he would launch a review to make sure that all women and girls have the opportunity to take part in the beautiful game. A spokesperson for Truss said England's Euro success would have a lasting impact on women's football, and she would investigate what prevents schools from delivering the recommended minimum of 2 hours PE per week. The Lionesses added, "Throughout the Euros, we as a team spoke about our legacy and goal to inspire a nation. Many will think this has already been achieved, but we see this only as the beginning. We are looking to the future. We want every young girl in the nation to be able to play football at school. We have made incredible strides in the women's game, but this generation of schoolgirls deserves more. We want their dreams to also come true. We want to create real change in this country, and we are asking you if you want to become Prime Minister on the 5th of September to help us achieve that change." The team celebrated their Euros triumph in front of 7,000 fans at Trafalgar Square on Monday, and the Queen led tributes by sending a message of congratulations in which she called them an inspiration. England and Manchester City forward Chloe Kelly, who scored the winning goal against Germany, said the Lionesses had set out to inspire the nation. Kelly grew up playing cage football with her 5 brothers and their friends, while also playing in the boys' school football team and at QPR. "You also want to be in an environment where you are comfortable, and that is massive for young girls," she told BBC Sports editor Dan Roan. "There will be a massive turning point from this summer. The girls as a group, we want to make a change, and if we can do so, that is massive. Girls being able to do what they love no matter the quality, let's go and play." While football is the most popular team sport for young people in England, only a third of girls aged 5 to 18 participate each week, according to research by the FA. The Department for Education said it was up to schools to decide which sports to offer pupils, but they should offer comparable activities to girls and boys. England's national curriculum is not gender specific and lists football only as an example sport alongside others such as badminton, cricket and netball. Figures published by the FA, which is running a Let's Girls Play campaign to give girls the same access to football as boys in schools and clubs by 2024, show that while 72% of primary schools offered equal football coaching to boys and girls last year, this fell to just 44% in secondary schools. Its research found 6% of the girls who play football in schools want to play more, and 91% of girls who do not want to play want the opportunity to do so. "We fully support the Football Association's ambition to give girls equal access to football in schools and clubs by 2024 and continue to work closely with them to help them achieve this," said a DFE spokesperson. "We're working to help thousands of girls take part in physical activity, including the Your Time program, which gives thousands of girls aged 8 to 16 access to competitive sport and sport leadership opportunities." Coral has recovered from storms and bleaching events to record levels across much of Australia's Great Barrier Reef, a survey has found. The reef's northern and central parts have the highest amount of coral cover since monitoring began 36 years ago, but coral cover in the southern part of the reef has decreased. The new coral is particularly vulnerable, meaning the progress could be quickly undone by climate change and other threats, officials say. Each year, the Australian Institute of Marine Science, AIMS, surveys the reef's health using aerial surveys and divers slowly towed by boat. After the 4th mass bleaching in 6 years was confirmed in March, AIMS had grave concerns ahead of this year's study. "In our 36 years of monitoring the condition of the Great Barrier Reef, we have not seen bleaching events so close together," said Chief Executive Paul Harditty. "Bleaching occurs when corals stressed by warm water temperatures expel the algae living within them that gives them colour and life. Only 2 mass bleaching events had ever been recorded before 2016. This year's bleaching event was the first to occur during a La Nina, a weather phenomenon which typically brings cooler water temperatures. These latest results demonstrate the reef can recover if conditions allow," Dr. Harditty says, "but acute and severe disturbances are becoming more frequent and longer. The reef has also been damaged by coral eating crown crown of thorns starfish, and tropical cyclones which generate damaging waves. Much of the new coral growth, a species called Acropora, is especially exposed to the reef's threats, said Dr. Mike Emsley from Ames. This means that future disturbance can be reversed, the observed recovery in a short amount of time, he said. Great Barrier Reef has been a World Heritage listed for 40 years due to its enormous scientific and intrinsic importance as one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the world. The Great Barrier Reef Marina Park Authority, which manages the reef, says the outlook for the icon is very poor due to climate change. UNESCO, the UN's scientific and cultural body, says not enough is being done to protect the reef. England's Katarina Johnson-Thompson and Scotland's Eilish McColgan earned hugely popular Commonwealth Games titles on the loudest night yet at Birmingham's Alexander Stadium. Johnson-Thompson's heptathlon win marks her return to the top of an international podium after 3 years of injury and coaching changes. She finished on 6,377 points, 144 clear of Northern Ireland's Kate O'Connor. McColgan's 10,000 metre victory marks her first major title at the age of 31. Her triumph also follows in footsteps of her mother Liz, who won the same title at Edinburgh in 1986 and Auckland in 1990. As the volume rose and the laps counted down, McColgan found herself locked together with Kenyan's Irene Cheptegei. Cheptegei, who finished 6th ahead of McColgan at last year's Tokyo Olympics, opened a meters lead with 250 meters to go, but McColgan reeled her in, surged on, and after checking over her shoulder for a response that never came, landed her biggest win yet. "This is the most incredible moment of my career," McColgan said. "I couldn't hear myself think or breathe in that last 100 meters. The crowd carried me. It's just been such an up and down year with COVID, another illness, and a couple of other niggles. I knew the fitness was somewhere in me, but I could not have asked for anything more tonight to have my family here." Liz McColgan embraced her daughter before paying tribute to her dedication and determination. "As a mother, to witness your daughter win is amazing. She just ran the race I always knew she was capable of running. It was amazing to watch and very nerve-wracking, but it's been a long time coming, and she put it together tonight." McColgan ran faster than her mum did for either of her Commonwealth Games golds. Her time of 30 minutes 48.6 seconds is a Games record and adds gold to the season that has already been littered with new landmarks. McColgan broke the European 10-kilometre, British half marathon, and Scottish 10,000 metre records this year, but an untimely hamstring niggle hindered her chances at last month's World Championships. Former world champion Johnson-Thompson said she hoped this win could reinvigorate her career after a run of bad luck and behind-the-scenes disruptions, after dedicating gold to her grandmother Mary, who died last week. "It has been a tough couple of years, so hopefully this can kickstart another part of my career. It has been hard. I had moments where I didn't know if I wanted to carry on, but to come out and get the gold and prove to myself that pushing through was worth it." Johnson-Thompson came into the 800-metre finale with a healthy lead over second place O'Connor, but left nothing to chance as he chased hard to the line to finish more than half a second ahead of her 21-year-old rival. The 800-metre may have been the coronation, but it was in the javelin that Johnson-Thompson saw off the young pretenders to her throne. The throwing events are where the 29-year-old is most vulnerable. She had not been within 3 metres of her personal best of 43.93 metres since she threw it in 2019. In Wednesday's penultimate event, O'Connor's opening round 50.83 metres in reply to Johnson-Thompson's initial 36.19 metres. Heat pressure on the defending champion, but Johnson-Thompson mustered a final round 44.33 metres before collapsing her face in her hands in a mix of surprise and delight. Further than she has ever thrown before, it was a performance few others had seen coming either after her spell of faltering form and fitness. Johnson-Thompson's England teammate Jade O'Dowda took bronze with 6,212 points. Elsewhere, Wales' 3-time Paralympic champion Aled Sion Davies claimed F42-44, 61-64 discus gold, with teammate Harrison Walsh taking bronze behind Sri Lanka's Palitha Halgahawala Gadara. Davies' best effort of 51.39 metres was short of the F42 discus world record of 56.21 metres he set in July, but was good enough to justify his decision to switch to the event after successive Paralympic shot put golds in 2016 and 2021. The government's chief scientific advisor who helped steer the UK through the pandemic is stepping down. So Patrick Vallance's 5-year ends in April. His successor has not yet been announced. In June, he was honoured at Buckingham Palace for his work updating the public on the COVID-19 virus, regularly appearing alongside alongside the Prime Minister at televised briefings. He previously voiced disappointment over COVID rules, which had been broken down in Downing Street. Sir Patrick, 62, was an academic and a consultant physician before joining GlaxoSmithKline, where he became President of Research and Development. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he was immensely grateful for Sir Patrick's advice and expertise throughout the pandemic. He had played an instrumental role in expanding and accelerating the science superpowers of this country, overseeing the development and innovative use of new technologies, responding to the global threat of climate change, boosting the life sciences and health of our nation, and ensuring our policies and decisions are informed by the latest and best scientific thinking. He will be missed by all when he leaves next year, and I wish him the very best in all future endeavours, Mr. Johnson added. Sir Patrick said science and engineering remain vital for the future prosperity of the UK, and high-quality evidence and science advice should be at the heart of all government decision-making, and he would remain fully committed to his completing his both challenging and immensely rewarding 5-year term. Professor Sir Jonathan Van Tam stepped down from his role as Deputy Chief Medical Officer in March. Nicknamed JVT, he became known for using football analogies to deliver COVID updates and was considered one of the best communicators of health advice on the virus. He was knighted at Buckingham Palace by the Duke of Cambridge in July, having missed the initial ceremony after catching COVID. Theft of farmers' livestock, vehicles and fuel is on the rise due to the UK's cost of living crisis, according to a new Countryside crime report. Rural crime claims payouts between January and March were over 40% higher than in 2021, insurer NFU Mutual says. It warned rising food prices could see livestock thefts increase further and contaminated meat enter the food chain. The NFU says the government needs to launch a national task force to deal with rural crime. David Exwood, the NFU's vice president, said taking a joined-up approach and establishing a cross-governmental task force, including DEFRA, the Home Office, the Ministry of Justice, the National Police Chiefs Council, and the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, will be crucial if we are to prevent further impacts from crime on farm businesses, both financially and emotionally. The NFU Mutual report warns that an increase in rustling, which saw an estimated £2.4 million worth of farm animals stolen in 2021, could see animals slaughtered in unhygienic conditions and sold on, threatening food security, animal welfare and people's health. Meanwhile, it said its claims data from the first half of this year indicate that fuel theft has more than doubled compared to the same period in 2021. Its survey found 49% of respondents felt fuel theft was now their greatest crime concern. The total cost of rural crime was estimated at £40.5 million across the UK last year, an overall decrease on previous years and the amount second annual fall during the pandemic. Security measures, rural crime initiatives, quieter roads and community vigilance all played their part in suppressing countryside crime, the report found. But Rebecca Davidson, NFU Mutual's Rural Affairs Specialist, said that this year farm theft is quickly gathering momentum as criminals make up for time lost over the past 2 pandemic years, and that was having an impact on farmers' mental health. Crime in the countryside causes high levels of anxiety and disruption, with many farmers and rural homeowners feeling vulnerable due to their isolated location, she added. The knowledge that determined thieves are scouring the countryside looking for targets and returning to carry out nighttime raids can lead to sleepless nights for people in remote areas.
Hello and welcome to News by Standards. Health warnings have been issued across the UK as temperatures are predicted to top 33 Celsius. Level 3 heat health alerts are in place across the south, the Midlands and eastern parts of England, where temperatures are soaring. The Met Office is advising people to stay indoors over lunch and to drink plenty of fluid to cope with the heat. Parents are also being encouraged to limit their children's exposure to the sun. The heat health alerts are expected to stay in place until next weekend. Met Office forecaster Greg Dewhurst said it could possibly be the hottest day of the year so far on Monday. Heat waves are becoming more likely and more extreme because of climate change. Mr. Dewhurst said central, southern and eastern parts of England could possibly see maximum heights of 33 Celsius, but for most it will be dry and sunny and well into the high 20s. The forecaster also warned temperatures could remain high overnight going into Tuesday, remaining in the low 20s in cities, so many may experience an uncomfortable night. The UK's highest temperature so far this year was 32.7 Celsius, recorded at London's Heathrow Airport on the 17th of June. Scotland and Northern Ireland had their hottest days of the year so far on Sunday. Aboyne in the Highlands hit highs of 27.3 23.3 Celsius, while Derrylin in County Fermanagh reached 24.3 Celsius. Sweltering temperatures are also affecting the north of England, with Manchester set to reach a high of 28 Celsius by mid-afternoon. Dr. Agostino Sousa from the UK Health Secretary Agency UKHSA has urged people to stay hydrated and try to find shade when the rays are strongest between noon and 3 p.m. The agency said the elderly, people with underlying health conditions, and those who live alone are particularly at risk. It suggests people shade or cover windows exposed to direct sunlight, check fans and fridges are working properly, and that medicines are correctly stored. The Met Office declares a heatwave when it records at least 3 days in a row with maximum temperatures exceeding a set temperature, which varies in different areas of the country. The UK's 4-level heat health system highlights the potential health impacts of high temperatures. Rail passengers in the West Midlands are facing disruptions to some services, with an operator blaming hot tracks. High track temperatures meant fewer trains could run because of a speed restriction, West Midlands Railway has said. Some weather models are predicting extreme heat for the UK next weekend, but BBC weather presenter Sarah Keith-Lucas said it is much too early to call. In some cases, temperatures above 40 Celsius are being predicted in southern England. This is the first time we've ever seen UK temperatures above 40 Celsius appear in computer output, even if it is only a tiny possibility. The world has already warmed by about 1.1 Celsius since the industrial era began in the later half of the 18th century, and temperatures will keep rising unless governments around the world make steep cuts to emissions. In England, there were 2,500 excess deaths in the summer of 2020 as a result of hot weather, while heat-related deaths in the UK could treble in 30 years, says the British Red Cross.
Plans to increase the number of 2-year-olds, nurseries and childminders can look after was set out in July. The government set allowing one adult to look after 5 rather than 4 children could help to bring down costs for parents. So what are the different types of childcare provision that are currently in the UK? The main types of paid childcare include childminders, who are based in their own home and look after children there, nurseries which look after children from a few months old up to school age, preschools which offer structured classes to prepare for starting school, and nannies who provide childcare in the family home. How expensive is childcare in the UK? The average cost of full-time nursery for a child aged under 2 in the UK is around £14,000 a year. Separate research carried out by the Trade Union Congress showed that part-time nursery fees have increased by 44% since 2010, an increase of over £2,000 a year. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, places the UK as the 3rd most expensive country along its members, behind Switzerland and New Zealand. The figures are based on a family with 2 children aged 2 and 3 attending centre-based childcare for at least 40 hours a week. They also take into account the different types of state support offered in each country. Will changing the childcare ratio reduce the childcare costs? Currently, the rules in England, Wales and Northern Ireland are to have 1 carer for every 4 children aged 2. The government is proposing to increase this number to 5 children in England, as it is in Scotland. It says the change could reduce childcare costs by up to 15%, around £40 a week. However, critics of the plan argue a greater proportion of Scottish carers have a higher level childcare qualification than their English counterparts and are therefore more qualified to look after a large group of young children. A study by the Institute for Fiscal Studies warned that reducing childcare costs would mainly benefit higher earning parents who spend the most on childcare. The report recommends that the government should improve the take-up of existing childcare support by low earning families, many of whom are unaware of the full range of support available. So why are childcare costs so expensive? Staffing costs account for around 82% of the total cost of running school-based childcare, such as a preschool according to the Department for Education. This includes wages, national insurance and pension contributions. The UK's relatively tight carer-to-child ratio adds to these high staffing costs. Sweden, in contrast, has no ratios in place for childcare, and costs are much cheaper as a result. Compared to other countries, the UK has fewer policies in place to ensure widespread access to affordable or free childcare. The cost of children and childcare will vary between the different types of provider. According to the Money Helper website, childminders are cheaper than nurseries, with nanny provision considerably more expensive. And what help is available with childcare costs? 3 and 4-year-olds are entitled to some free childcare provision throughout the UK, with different schemes in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. It needs to be approved childcare. This means the provider has to be registered, with different requirements for each childcare type. In England, all 3 and 4-year-olds get at least 15 hours of free childcare per week for 38 weeks of the year. This increases to 30 hours for working parents, provided their income meets the eligibility criteria. 2-year-olds in England are also eligible for 15 hours of free childcare under certain circumstances. For example, if the family receives universal credit credit or the child is in foster care. As well as 3 hours, tax-free childcare is available throughout the UK. Under this scheme, the government pays £2 into an account for every £8 the family puts in, up to the value of £2,000 per child per year. Eligible families in England can claim a child benefit for children aged 16 and under. This amounts to £21.80 per week for the first child and £14.45 per week for additional children, although the benefit cap may limit the amount of children a family can receive for the benefits. More than 100,000 doses of the monkeypox vaccine have been acquired in order to combat the spread of the virus, the government has said. Last month, the NHS stepped up its monkeypox vaccination programme in England as infections rose. Vaccines Minister Maggie Throp said the majority of vaccines were being made available in London, with about 75% of confirmed cases in the capital. But she urged people to wait to be invited to receive their jabs. While anyone can get monkeypox, the majority of those with the virus are of a certain nature and other men who have sex with men. The latest figures show that nationally there have been 2,436 confirmed cases, with 1,778 of those in London. Across the capital, there are more than 18 clinics offering vaccinations, including the Dean Street Sexual Health Clinic in Soho, Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, Guy's Hospital in Southwark, Mortimer Market Centre in Camden, and Barking Hospital Outpatient Centre East. During a visit to a clinic in Hammersmith, Miss Throp told BBC London, "We've procured over 100,000 doses, and that is the most of any other EU country, so we're definitely ahead of the game on that." Last week, the European Commission's Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, HERA, said 109,090 doses had been procured since the outbreak began. Spain received 5,300 doses, while Portugal, Germany and Belgium were next in line to receive vaccinations. Ms Throp added, "We are still at a bit of an unknown with this, and we have reached out to the sexual health clinics, asking them what numbers they have in their clinics of those needing to get jabbed. We've got to get the first doses in people's arms. That is our priority. We need to make sure we have the right cohorts of people coming forward." More than 16,000 cases of monkeypox has been reported in 75 countries, according to WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. He said there have been 5 deaths as a result of the outbreak. One issue regarding the vaccinations is how best to organise the programme. Perhaps in the absence of clear public messaging, but through an effective grapevine. People have been queuing around the block for a weekend drop-in centre at Guy's Hospital. It may have given the impression of panic or a system creaking under pressure, but at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital's 4 clinics, they've been successfully harnessing the logistical lessons learned from COVID. They've been poring over their patient database, inviting by text those deemed most at risk, and processing dozens of people by appointment every day. There are some who think monkeypox needs a SAR to be appointed to oversee the handling of the response to the outbreak. Maggie Throp says for the moment she's content with the way vaccines are being distributed and that people with symptoms are being well advised. But it's a 2-dose treatment, and for the moment, although more doses are being manufactured, the minister isn't saying when they will be made available.